my name is Justin and this lesson is based on Unit 2, learning about the language. Basically what it is looking into the grammar and the actual mechanics of the English language. Now as English language teachers, it's important for us to be able to know and identify the different types of grammar that exist in the language. So if we know the language fairly well and the mechanics, it means that we can correct the student's mistake with quite ease, and we can also develop our own language skills. So what we're first going to look at is the different classes of the English language. The main classes are nouns, okay, which is any person, any place or anything. For example, Jack, Cork, car. Verbs, which are the action words where the word actually describes an action. For example, walk, run, sleep. Then we have adjectives which describe the nouns. For example, the colours such as blue, white, red, or the gradables such as big and small. And then we have the adverbs which describe the verbs. For example, quickly, slowly, etc. So have a think for a moment if you can think of any other types of classes of words. So we also have determiners such as articles such as the, a, an. We also have, for example, modal verbs such as can, could, will, would. We have prepositions such as to, for, and we have pronouns such as it, he, and who. So again, it is important for us as teachers to be able to identify the different types of words, and of course it's important to be able to teach them. Two main types of words classes. There are open classes and closed classes. An open class admits new words as the new words are invented. So for example, every day new words appear from, let's say, the internet or slang or from speech. And these all enter into the open classes. So they're called open because they allow these new words to exist. Now, some examples of open classes would be nouns. So we could have new words which come into being with nouns. Verbs, there's also new verbs can be inventives, also part of the open class, and adverbs. So the idea is that these four do admit new words as they are invented. Now the closed classes are different. This class does never admit new words. So they have this limited membership, we say. So if a new word appears, it usually goes into the open class. And they include function words. So words that actually carry out a proper function in the sentence. And examples would be pronouns. So we know we have the pronouns he, she, it, me, you. There should never be a new word or a new pronoun invented. Determiners are the same. So a, the, that, some, each. Again, we think that there should not be new determiners ever invented. The modal verbs, there's only one list of modal verbs, which is the can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, must. And again, we assume that there will be no new modal verbs invented. The same with our three auxiliary verbs, be, have, and do, with conjunctions. So the conjunction is a word which joins together two phrases or two clauses. For example, and, but, if, unless, and the same with prepositions. Prepositions is another member of a closed class, such as in, at, of, by, and with. So first we're going to look in detail at nouns. And nouns are considered to be the largest class of words. So they say that there's more nouns than verbs, than adjectives, than adverbs. And they seem to denote classes and categories of things that exist in the world. This includes people, animals, inanimate things, places, events, qualities, and states. So some examples of nouns would be accident, cat, conscience, pride, James, mountain, Paris. And you will see in a moment that there are different categories of nouns. We have concrete nouns, abstract nouns, countable nouns, and uncountable nouns. Now, the first thing that's important is that nouns have both a singular, which means one, and plural form. And most nouns have these forms, and they change the word by having a different ending. And the ending is what we call a morpheme. The most common form is the S form, but sometimes it does become ES. And usually when it ends with a Y, the noun changes to IES for plural. So you see the examples in your PowerPoint is cat simply takes just the S. But then you have wish, okay, which is the verb here, but it becomes the noun by adding the ES. And then baby ends with the Y. To make the plural, we add IES. Then we have to remember that some have completely irregular endings or irregular plurals. For example, ox becomes oxen, alumnus becomes alumni. So again, it's important for us as teachers to know the different spellings for the nouns and to know the different types of nouns that exist. But it's also important and very important for the students. So we have 4 main types of nouns. We have common nouns, which is almost the same as a concrete noun, but it's a noun that exists mainly on its own. For example, table, boy, and most nouns. Then we have proper nouns. These are the names. So for example, Joanna, New York, Mississippi River. Then we have our concrete nouns. Very similar to common nouns, but you'll see in a moment how to differentiate between both. So for example, cup, bus, ball. And then we have our abstract nouns. So something that we cannot actually hold or touch is considered abstract. For example, love, beauty, etc. So on your PowerPoint, you see the nouns diagram, and it shows you how all nouns are divided up into each category. So we begin with the umbrella term of nouns on the top, and it's divided up into proper nouns and then common nouns. Proper nouns, as we said, are the names. So have a look at where it says common nouns. This is when it's divided up again into concrete and abstract. So a concrete noun is a common noun, but this is when we have to differentiate between concrete and abstract. And then concrete and abstract are divided up into countable and uncountable. And this is when sometimes it gets really difficult for students, especially at A1 and A2 level. They need to know that some nouns you can physically count and other nouns you cannot. For example, our abstract nouns and our concrete nouns. So, a countable noun usually will take the S for the plural, and you can physically count the noun itself. The examples we have are house, so you have 1 house, 2 houses. Cat, 1 cat, 2 cats. Then when it's uncountable, you cannot physically count the object. For example, water, rice, fruit. So we never say 2 rices or 2 fruits. Now, the thing to remember is, nowadays, especially in spoken language, nouns such as water and beer, some people consider countable, because you may say, can I have 2 beers? But usually we would say, can I have 2 glasses of beer? Then, looking at the abstract nouns, they are also divided up into countable and uncountable. So, you have the example life, you would say 1 life, 2 lives. You have discussion, 1 discussion, 2 discussions. Then you have the uncountable forms. For example, fun, you wouldn't say 1 fun, 2 funs. The same with information. You never say 1 information and 2 informations. So, having a look when differentiating between countable and uncountable nouns, we need to again know the plural. So, in a regular countable noun, you could have 1 dog, 2 dogs. But then the uncountable, for example butter, You never say one butter, two butters. And it's important to remember that some nouns and singular and plural forms are the exact same. They never change. For example, sheep, you say one sheep, two sheep. For example, series, one series, two series. So it's just important to see that some of them have this regular countability and some have an irregular countability. Now, to look at the actual structure and the syntactic characteristics of nouns, we see that they may be preceded by determiners. So they may have an article or a pronoun before it. For example, the boy, the personal pronoun my cat, or the inclusive pronoun these children. They may be modified by other adjectives. For example, a large pizza. So you have pizza, the noun, you have large, the adjective. A tall building. The same, building the noun, tall adjective. A grey sky. Sky the noun, grey the adjective. Or they may be pre-modified by other nouns. So two nouns together. And for example, you have a university degree. So degree is your main noun, and then the modifier is university before the degree. Or a computer program. So on your PowerPoint, you see it gives you different types of nouns or the way they end, then how to form the plurals, and then an example. So if you see the first one, the FE ending, this changes to V, the F changes to V, and then you add the S. For example, knife, knives, wife, wives. If it ends with just F, again it changes to V, but then you must add ES. For example, half, halves, wolf, wolves. If it ends with O, we add ES. For example, potato, potatoes, volcano, volcanoes. If it ends with US, we change the US to an I. For example, cactus becomes cacti. Focus becomes foci. If it ends with IS, you change IS to ES. So analysis becomes analysis. Crisis becomes crises. If it ends with ON, we change the ON to an A. So phenomenon becomes phenomena. And then you have different kinds of changes, where we change the vowel, for example, one man, two men, where we change the entire word. Child becomes children, or where we add a different ending. Person becomes people, mouse becomes mice. Then we have the unchanging examples. For example, sheep, sheep, deer, deer, fish, fish. Be careful with fish, because some people give the plural of fish as fishes. So again, it's important for us as teachers to be able to know the difference in the different parts of language and the different rules for plurals, for spellings, and so on. So the second class, or the second type of language we're going to look at, is an open class of words. For example, verbs. And these verbs typically denote actions, events, processes, and states. For example, we have sing, we have consult, eat, argue, break, sleep, encounter, think, believe, and contain. So again, for a moment, have a think as to what different English verbs you know. Okay, we have four main types of verbs. The first type is our lexical verbs, or which are also called common verbs. And this is the biggest class of verbs. It includes most verbs in the English language, and again, they belong to the open class. So lexical verbs can admit new verbs when they are created. And they may denote different types of actions, states, or events. For example, walk, shine, think, drive, feel, shout, buy, fall. Then we have our auxiliary verbs. Now this is a very close class. There are only 3 auxiliary verbs in the English language. They are to be, to do, and to have. And they add almost extra information to the lexical verb itself. They form questions, such as interrogatives, and they form negatives, and also aspects and the passive voice. It is important to remember that be, do, and have, being auxiliary verbs, can also be lexical verbs. An auxiliary verb is a helpful verb which helps the sentence to make complete sense. For example, I am Justin is the verb to be used as a lexical verb. So it's the main verb in the sentence. Then if you say I am running, this is when it becomes an auxiliary verb, because your main verb is run and the helpful verb is to be, to make the continuous tense. The third type of verbs are modal verbs. These are also a very, very close class of verbs. They consist of core modal verbs. As we said earlier, you have can, could, may, might, will, would, shall, should. These are the modal verbs. And again, they add extra information to your lexical verb, mainly concerning degrees of certainty and necessity. Later we will actually look in detail at the different modal verbs, but usually what's most important is their meaning. For example, you could have can I go to the shop? That's permission. Then you could have can you help me? That's a request. The fourth type of verbs which English language students always find really difficult are multi-word verbs, or what is also sometimes referred to as the umbrella term of phrasal verbs. Again, it is like a lexical verb which can be combined with one or two particles to function as one verb with a unitary meaning. So you could have 3 units of the language or 3 words, but it still means just one verb. And there are 3 types. You have phrasal verbs, which are the verb with an adverb or particle. For example, sit down. So you have main verb sit plus your adverb particle of down. Or go away. The same, main verb go, away your adverb or particle. The second type of multi-word verbs are prepositional verbs. So the verb must have a preposition in order to be called a prepositional verb. For example, the verb go against. You have your main verb go followed by your preposition against. Or look after. Main verb look followed by your preposition after. And then the third type is what's called phrasal prepositional verbs, which take both. So they have, for example, your adverb and your preposition. The phrase look forward to. Your main verb is look, forward is your adverb, and then to your preposition. Or for example, put up with. Main verb put, preposition up, and adverb with. So in English, and like with many languages, there are regular and irregular verbs. And this again is important for ESL students. The regular verb simply adds different inflections or changes to the base form without an internal change to the word itself. There are approximately 250 irregular verbs in English, and they are used as frequently, if not more frequently, than the regular verbs. If you have a look at the examples on the PowerPoint, you see you have the infinitive to cough. The infinitive of the verb is the verb that always appears in the dictionary, and it is usually preceded by the preposition to. The base form of the verb is cough, so without the preposition to. Then the present form is cough again. The plural simply adds an S for the third person coughs. The present participle for the progressive tenses simply adds ing. The past form ed, and the past participle ed as well. This tells you that it's an irregular verb. Usually, to identify between regular and irregular verbs, if you put the verb into the past tense and it ends with ed, then it's regular. If it changes, then it's automatically irregular. So if we think the verb walk, past tense is walked, so immediately that's regular. But if we think of the verb sing, the past tense is sang, and then that is automatically irregular. So there are some main rules for regular verbs. They appear basically in 4 forms. So the base form stays common. For example, on your PowerPoint it says remember, provide. Then if it's regular, the third person should simply add an S or an ES. For example, walk, walks, wash, washes. Then the present participle should simply add an ing for the continuous tenses. For example, listen becomes listening, wait becomes waiting, and then for the past tense and the past participle should simply add ed. For example, move, moved, want, wanted. The rule is if the verb breaks any of those rules, then it is automatically irregular. But the easiest way for students to remember is to see if they can put it into the past. If it takes ed, automatically regular. If it changes, automatically irregular. Now, perhaps the most irregular verb in the language is the verb to be, because it has separate inflectional forms for each form of the verb. In other words, the verb is constantly changing. And it is also one of the most common verbs in the English language. So let's have a look at the base form. The base form is be. The present form is am, or are, or is. And the third person form is. The present participle changes to being, the past form was or were, and the past participle been. So again, this shows you how irregular the verb to be is. As we said earlier, there are approximately 250 regularly used irregular verbs in English. And it is important that students need to try to learn these forms as much as they can. So usually in most EFL, ESL books, there will be a table with regular and irregular verbs, and the students should choose as many to learn as they can. Let's have a look at a very regular verb. We have speak as the base form, the present form speak, the third form speaks, the continuous form speaking, then it changes in the past. The past, the word is completely different. You have spoke, and then the participle is spoken. So the verb is regular until it comes to the past form, which changes and tells you that speak is an irregular verb. So, having a look at different types of irregular verbs, the forms can vary. They can change. So, the base form, the past form, and the ed form can all be the same. If we take this common verb, cut. It's cut in the present, cut in the past, and cut in the past participle. So, I cut yesterday, and I have cut. The different past tenses, it can have different past tenses, but the same past participle. For example, come, came, come. All 3 forms can also be different. For example, speak, spoke, spoken. And the ed form is often what's referred to as the past participle. Okay, so the next class we will look at are adjectives. So we've just completed nouns and we've completed verbs. Now, an adjective is the third open word class. So these are words which can add new words as they come into existence. And they express some feature or quality of the noun or the pronoun. They're generally very, very descriptive words. So if you think when describing something, we use adjectives. You see the examples, the noun girl. So now we're going to describe the girl. we say the young girl. The same scarf. We describe the scarf, we say the red long scarf. Car, the noun, an adjective to describe car would be, for example, fast or expensive. Tail being the noun, the adjective to describe tail, for example, long. So the adjective basically describes the noun, and it's a very, very descriptive word. Now, adjectives can be gradable, which means they vary along a scale which can be set at more or less in terms of their qualities, or their properties, or their states. For example, we have the adjective cold. We can gradable it, which makes it very cold. We have small, again we can grade this, make it extremely small. Very is a very, very common gradable adjective, and quiet. Then we have some adjectives which are non-gradable. So they cannot be graded on a scale of more or less. For example, dead, you'd never say very dead. Male, you'd never say very male. Single, you'd never say very single. So that's an important characteristic of adjectives, is that they can be gradable or they can be ungradable. If they are gradable, it basically adds like a scale to the adjective. The position of adjectives is really important. Some of them can pre-modify the noun. So they can go before the noun, and this is what we call an attributive adjective. And others can go after the noun, which is what we call a predicative adjective. So an example of an attributive adjective would be beautiful, following pre-modifying the noun house, beautiful house. Or the colours. The colours are usually attributive. For example, car, you would say red car. You would never say car red. Then, some of them occur as what we call a complement, and they are predicative and come after the noun. For example, the house is huge. So you have the noun house followed by the adjective huge. She is French. You have the pronoun she followed by adjective French. So when looking at adjectives, we need to look at their inflection, or how they are formed, how they are structured. Some of them will take comparative and superlative forms. So you're comparing two adjectives, the middle, the second is the comparative form. Then when comparing three, the third or final is the superlative form. For example, the regular ones will take ER and EST. So we have big, bigger with double G, biggest with double G. Then you have the more irregular ones, where they take more or most. For example, comfortable becomes more comfortable, becomes most comfortable. And many allow the addition of ly to change it from an adjective to an adverb, but not all. For example, the adjective quick becomes adverb quickly. Then when using participle forms, they take the ing. Promise becomes promising, boring, and this describes the effect. Whereas if they take the ed form, this describes how the person feels. For example, surprise becomes surprised, bore becomes bored. Then compounding also exists. So you can put two adjectives together to make one adjective. For example, large scale, eye-catching, English-speaking, homemade. And these are usually hyphenated with the hyphen in the middle. So another part of their inflection or their formation is the addition of affixes. For example, prefixes and suffixes that can be added to the stem. Now the stem is the main part or the central part of the adjective. Some common prefixes are this, il, im, in, ir, mis, non, and un. And some examples would be disinterested, illiterate, immature, indefinite, irregular, misplaced, nonconformist, unhappy. And this becomes really important when trying to teach the language to your students because they need to know the affixes. The prefixes always go before the adjective and the suffixes always go at the end. Some common suffixes are able, al, ial, ful, ic, ical, ive, less, ous, and y. Some examples: usable, normal, radial, wishful, heroic, political, talkative, endless, famous, and windy. Now, different prefixes have different meanings. For example, the prefix on, un, usually has a negative meaning or a negative connotation. So you would have, for example, the stem. Let's say sustain. If you add the suffix able, sustainable, and then you look at the word class or the meaning. So if it's an adjective, and does it mean ability? It's very important when teaching adjectives to be aware and to make your students aware of synonyms and also antonyms. The antonym is the opposite and the synonym is another word which has the exact same meaning as the adjective. For example, most common adjectives are members of antonyms. So most common adjectives have opposites. For example, big, small, rough, smooth, tall, short, happy, sad. Then, most also have synonyms, which are words which have the similar meaning to the original adjective. For example, big, large, fresh, new. It's important to remember that synonyms are context bound. So, in the meaning of the sentence, only one adjective may have complete sense, whereas the synonym may not be clear and may not fit in with the use of the adjective in the sentence. The final word class we're going to look at is adverbs. And adverbs are words similar to adjectives, but whereas adjectives describe the noun, adverbs describe the verb. And they answer questions of usually how, where, when, and in what manner. So we say you have adverbs of degree, adverbs of manner, adverbs of place, adverbs of time. Have a look at the sentences. You have, can you move it carefully? It's fragile. So this adverb is describing the verb move. And this is an adverb of manner. In other words, how you're moving it. Then you have quickly, we're late. Again, it's a how adverb. It's telling you to move quickly. She swims really well. Now again here, this adverb is gradable. So you have the verb to swim, the adverb well, and then you're saying she swims really well. Don't go so fast. Now fast is an important one. Fast can be an adjective and an adverb. For example, he drives fast, that's the adverb, because it's referring to the verb drive, and then he has a fast car. That's the adjective because it's describing the car, the noun, as being fast. Another example of an adverb in a sentence, you have to turn it clockwise. Again, this is manner, in what way you must turn it. Come over here, adverb of place or where. Actually, I don't know her. Can be adverb of degree. I haven't seen them recently. Again, adverb of time, and the bathroom's upstairs on the left. Adverb of place. So when looking at adverbs, it's important, of course, to know the meaning of each adverb that exists. So An adverb is a word that describes or adds to the meaning of a verb or an adjective or another adverb or a sentence, and which answers such questions as how, where, and when. So we have some adverbs of time. For example, now, hourly, yesterday. We also have adverbs of place, such as here, there, locally. We also have adverbs of manner, such as how we do something, carefully, slowly. We have adverbs of degree, or these gradable adverbs. For example, really, very, totally. And then we have linking adverbs, which are very similar to conjunctions. So something that adds two things or two phrases together. For example, therefore, however. These can also be referred to as discourse markers. So, like with adjectives, we must look to see how the adverbs are formed or what are their inflectional forms. Adverbs ending with a suffix, usually ly, added to an adjective. For example, you have the adjective quiet. We make it the adverb by adding ly. Now this is the most common form of adverbs. You have the adjective peaceful. You add ly to make it peacefully. And a note for spelling is if the adjective ends with l, you double the l and add the y for the adverb. Then you have some irregular suffixes. For example, sideways, lengthwise, homewards. Then you have some simple adverbs. Just, only, soon, quite. And then there are also compound adverbs. So, two words again put together to make the entire adverb. For example, somehow, therefore, whereby. It's very, very important to note that some adverbs can have the same form as the adjectives. Like we said earlier, the adverb fast can be also adjective, can be also adverb. The same with hard, outside, and monthly. So again, it's important that we as teachers know the different classes of words and that our students know them. And if we know the different classes, or what's called the meta-language, then it's easier to correct the students' errors or to guide them when using grammar. Like with adjectives, the position of the adverb is extremely important. They often pre-modify a word or a phrase. They are most often an adjective or another adverb. Let's have a look at the 4 examples. She was really unwell. So you have the adjective unwell because it's describing the pronoun she, and then you're given the gradable adjective of really. He walked really slowly. Again, you have the adverb slowly because it's describing the verb walked, and again we're grading it by using the adverb of really. So it's 2 adverbs, really and slowly. Then you have the sentence, she invited nearly everyone. You have the pronoun everyone, and we pre-modify it with the adverb nearly. And then we have the sentence, we had quite a night. So you have the noun night pre-modified by the adverb quite, which means like almost a very good night. Now be aware that some adverbs can of course post-modify the word or phrase, so they can follow the word. For example, trip abroad. You have pronoun followed by noun trip, followed by the adverb abroad. Let's have a look now at the different errors that can exist with adverbs. And again, it's important that we are aware of them and also our students are aware of the different errors that can exist. First one is, we need to not confuse adjectives and adverbs. So remember, first of all, that adjectives modify nouns only. or they're used after certain verbs, such as be, become, seem, look, smell, and taste. So these adjectives follow these verbs, and the main thing is the adjectives describe the noun, whereas the adverb usually describes the verb. Have a look at the three examples. She walks elegantly. So again, it's an adverb of manner describing how she walks. Elegantly reflects back to the verb walk. He wore an elegant suit and tie. Here it becomes an adjective because elegant is describing the suit and the tie, and then she looks very elegant in that long skirt. Again, here it's an adjective because it's looking at how she looks. Like with adjectives, we must look to see the different position that adverbs have in a sentence. This becomes really difficult for learners because they don't know whether to put the adverb at the beginning, at the middle, or at the end of the sentence. And there are these three main positions: the beginning, the middle, and the end. Have a look at the first sentence. Actually, comma, I don't know her. So again, this begins with the adverb actually, and then the sentence follows. So it's in initial or beginning stage of the sentence. Then it can be in the middle. I don't actually know her. And then it can also go to the end. I don't know her actually. Have a look at the next example. On Saturdays, I go to Dublin. Changes, I go to Dublin on Saturdays. Changes again, I go on Saturdays to Dublin. So this is when it does become difficult for students because you can put the adverb at the beginning, the middle, or the end of the sentence. Another example would be, we often play football, or we play football often. For example, I have often played football. I have played often football. So again, this is what becomes difficult for students, is to see if the adverb is positioned at the beginning, at the middle, or the end. So now have a look at the next slide, which is to distinguish if the word underlined is an adjective or an adverb. So you have 8 sentences. So, number 1, do you think the word quickly is an adjective or an adverb? Number 2, do you think the word black is an adjective or an adverb? Number 3, do you think the word late is an adjective or an adverb? Number 4, the word lately, is it an adjective or an adverb? Number 5, pink, is it an adjective or an adverb? Number 6, fast, is it an adjective or an adverb? Number 7, hard, is it an adjective or an adverb? And number 8, mad, is it an adjective or an adverb? The main thing to look for is it describing a noun or is it describing a verb? So, how did you do? How many did you get correct? Have a look at number 1. The sun burnt the grass quickly. It's an adverb because quickly is describing how the sun burnt the grass. So it's describing the verb to burn. Number 2, did you get that one correct? It is an adjective because it's the colour black and it's describing the noun grass. Number 3, adjective, again because it's describing the pronoun of everyone and it becomes late. So everyone were late. Number 4, did you get that one correct? It's an adverb because it's describing the verb to make using lately. Number 5, pink. The colour pink is an adjective and it's saying I can paint your hall pink, so I can paint the hall pink. Number 6, did you get that one correct? It is an adverb because I can paint your hall fast. The word fast is describing how you paint and not the hall itself. Number 7, he drove his employees hard. So again, it's an adverb because it's describing how he drove his employees. Number 8, he drove his employees mad. It's an adjective because it's describing the employees and how they feel. And that concludes Unit 2, learning about the language in Introduction to Word classes.